Good evening. This is Captain Terry Hestilow, United States Army retired, and just wanted to take a few minutes to talk to you about ways that we amend our Constitution. The Constitution is the document that protects every single right that we have. And it's a contract. It's not a living document. It's a contract. When you sign a contract, you agree to abide by the terms of the contract. It doesn't just evolve. It's not something that's living. It's not breathing. And whenever you hear someone talk about the Constitution being a living, breathing document, beware, because they are trying at that moment to scam you out of your rights. The Constitution is a contract, a compact that was signed by the people of the United States, their states, and the federal government. It was an agreement under which the states and the federal government would operate, and it defined who would be responsible for what actions and who would not be allowed to exercise power in different areas of government. We have come to a place in our country where the United States Constitution is under direct attack, not by Nazis in Germany, not by the imperialists of the Imperial Japan back in as we were back in the middle part of the 20th century. We're not our Constitution is not necessarily under attack by Putin or other governments. It's not even under attack really by the Islamists who have sworn to overtake the whole world and make the whole world submissive to Islam. The people who are attacking our Constitution today and who would rob you of your protections under the Constitution today are the liberals who run our, for the most part, federal government. And many states have state governments that have been overrun by the same people. And it really began way back under the administration of President Woodrow Wilson. But it has continued through, and particularly through the educational institutions. Frankly, most of our young people today have no idea what the Constitution is, what it does, what it protects, because they were either not taught or they were mal-educated about the Constitution of the United States. And that was for a purpose. Liberals don't want you to really understand the Constitution, because if you understand the Constitution, then they can't pull the wool over your eyes and steal you blind and take your rights and make you a slave. And that's exactly what the liberals want to do. Now let me deal with a couple of issues in this brief video, and then I'm going to let you go and think about it. I'll probably refer back to it in subsequent broadcasts. But I want to make sure that we understand from an overview that the Constitution is a contract. And in the contract, there are terms that we've all agreed to. And our Bill of Rights was basically agreed to in 1791 and has served to protect the states and the people ever since 1791. So it's really very important to get a grasp, to understand not only what it is, but how it changes. Recently, as a year ago, Justice Anthony Kennedy famously wrote in his majority opinion in the Obergefell v. Hodges case that Americans, under his and the other four liberal justices' opinions, was that Americans had evolved to a place where they believed that where the Supreme Court justices believed, and this is 5 judges, Supreme Court judges believed that we should be able to accept same-sex marriage. Damn biology and damn all of history. The Supreme Court decided by themselves that the states had no right to determine who could or could not be married within their borders. Now, this was something that had never been in the Constitution, and it was never addressed by the Constitution. But frankly, marriage has predated not only the United States but most countries that are in existence today. Marriage is the institution that predates all of that. In fact, it goes back to the very beginning with Adam and Eve. Now, you can have your own conflicts about that, but the fact of the matter is, without marriage, we don't have a society, and we don't have a foundation to raise children. But let me go to this idea that the Constitution that we had evolved. If there is an evolution of thought in the United States, the founders of the Constitution, the founders of the nation, accommodated that potential evolution within the text of the Constitution. And they did that in Article 5 of the Constitution itself. I want to read it to you because I want you to hear it. I want you to understand what it is. And I want you to understand what it says. I'm reading verbatim Article 5 of the United States Constitution to you. I want you to understand it, to know. Article 5 says, the Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall purpose amendments to this Constitution, or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution, when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by the conventions in 3/4 thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress, provided that no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808 shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses in the 9th section of the first article, and that no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. Now, as I read Article 5, let me ask you to consider, did you hear at any point, excuse that interruption, my computer wanted to tell me something, but I'm not going to start over. Did you hear at any point in that reading of Article 5, and you can go read it yourself, look for it, see if you find the word evolution anywhere in that article as a means to amend the Constitution, to change. Amendments means to change. There is no suggestion that evolution is a process by which the Constitution is amended. Neither is there any suggestion that 51% of the voting population of the country can at any time change the Constitution or the rights that are guaranteed in our Constitution, the way our government operates. We are not a democracy. A lot of people labor under this illusion that we are a democracy. A democracy is where everybody gathers together in the city square and they vote, and 51% of the people voting. If they have a majority, then they get whatever they want. That is not how we operate. We operate under a constitution, and we have people who represent us. We're a constitutional republic. So Article 5 doesn't allow for evolution as a means, but it does say that if there is an evolution, if you will, of thought, that the legislatures and the states have the ability under this document to change the document itself. But nowhere, at no point, anywhere in the Constitution, does the Constitution provide that the Constitution shall be amended or the rights changed or given or taken away by a majority of 5 judges. That would be a judicial tyranny. And yet that's what we have. Back in June of last year, when the Supreme Court acted illegally. And listen to me, I want you to understand this. You can quote me. You can go to Justice Kennedy. You can go to Loretta Lynch. Tell him, Captain Terry Hestilow, United States Army retired. He said it. The Supreme Court acted illegally. I begged my U.S. Representative, Michael Burgess, to initiate articles of impeachment. I like Mike. I think he votes right on a lot of things. But he showed cowardice when he refused to initiate articles of impeachment. And by the way, so did your representative as well. Because the Constitution was violated by the Supreme Court of the United States. They are supposed to sit under the Constitution, subject to the Constitution. How do I know that? Well, let's look over here at the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. Let's see exactly what it says. The powers not delegated or given to, not delegated to the United States, that would be the federal government, by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Now, that's a very, these days we have 2,000 pages in legislation to cover the lies and the deception that are being pulled over on us. This one sentence, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution. So all powers that have not been delegated in the Constitution to the federal government, nor prohibited by the Constitution to the states. So the states exercise all powers not specifically delegated to the federal government. And nowhere in the Constitution does the Constitution authorize the Supreme Court to change the laws of the states in areas that authority was not first delegated to the federal government. And no place in the Constitution does it say anything about marriage anyway, much less same-sex marriage. So what we had was 5 judges who decided to tear down the Constitution, that they would not sit under it, but that they would make believe that they are above the Constitution and that they can change the Constitution at will. And they tore it down, and like Bill Ayers standing on the American flag, like Democrats, they tore down the Constitution and stood on it and decided to get their pen out and to change the Constitution. That's what they did. That was an illegal act. Why am I exercised about this? Number one, I'm a citizen. This contract is my contract. I was born, I was raised. But not only that, as a soldier of the United States Army, I swore to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And when people act illegally and destroy our rights under the Constitution, they're my domestic enemy. Those 5 judges committed an act of treason against the United States by striking down the rights that the states properly had. And the fact of the matter is, the states should have nullified the act of the Supreme Court, just as they should have in 1973, when the Supreme Court did basically the same thing that the 1857 court did under Roger Taney, when he ruled. He led the majority of the Supreme Court by the same number in denying the rights of personhood to Africans, whether they were free or slave. In 1973, the Blackmun Court did exactly the same thing to preborn children. Living human beings denied the rights of personhood. Now, those were illegal acts. What the court did last June was no less an illegal act. And let me tell you, if you don't know where they were going with that, where they were going is next, if they get away with that, and they have so far, because our House of Representatives will not impeach, and the Senate will not convict any of these lawless actions or people and remove them from office because they are afraid of political correctness. Your constitutional rights are being done away with because of cowardice in the House and the Senate. They refuse to hold the the Supreme Court accountable to the Constitution. So why did they do that? Well, the next step is to do the same thing to every other of your individual rights and states' rights in the Constitution. So you like your Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms? Well, guess what? If you're not going to stand up and say they acted illegally and should be called to account for their illegal actions last June when they violated the 10th Amendment and illegally amended the Constitution by making a ruling from the bench, that's called judicial fiat. That they, from the bench, decided to overthrow the Constitution and to write into it something they wanted themselves. If you will not stand up against that, the day of your ultimate submission under the yoke of judicial tyranny and Marxist socialism is upon us. So you must stand up now. I'm going to end this for now. This is Captain Terry Hestilow, and I'll talk to you about it more later.